Okay. Hello, all of our viewers. My name's Yuyang. I'm here with my friend Ben. Um, we are doing this kind of podcast slash video cast because we have what I think are very different political views, and we're about to talk through some of them. Some of the main goals for me in terms of doing this was just to get an opportunity to show people that it's okay to talk um, civilly about some issues that are very, very near and dear to our hearts, and also so I can get some more understanding on how the other side thinks. For me, I am a um, Chinese American immigrant who is in higher education. I think I'm a pretty good embodiment of what people call the liberal coastal elite. And so I'm happy to learn more about some of the other side that I usually don't hear about. Um, Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm more of a centrist, right-leaning person. I have my disputes with the left mainly, but there's the right. You got the Christian fanatics, God forbid. Um, but I'm white, man. Let me think. I came to this, or I agreed to this, with the intention of also, learning about the other side. I've studied the left for quite some time, and it's just been it's been tough to try and talk to people, but I feel like Yuyang, is that right? Am I saying it
Yeah.
right? Yuyang?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That you're gonna be more understanding and more willing to just kind of help me along, and it might even, you might be able to persuade me on some subjects just because you're going to be more reasonable instead of, well, you don't know what you're talking about, stop talking about that, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's definitely going to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Thank you again for having me on here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're coming to this with a lot of the same goals.
Hmm.
Just to remind us and everyone out there, I think we didn't want to go on and on, so we just came up mutually with a couple of topics that we want to talk about. The first is the concept of a social justice warrior, and some of the issues that people have with social justice warriors, which I probably fall into that category. And then we'll probably talk about some about political correctness along the way. I would be surprised if we don't, but we'll definitely hit that if we don't. And then I think we'll talk about feminism as well. So those are some of the topics that we'll talk about. Um,
Awesome.
yeah. So uh, tell me. I think yeah. I'll let you start off. Uh, I think you have a lot of experience with social justice warrior dumb. Why don't you start the topic off for us?
Well, I want to start off, first of all, I don't think that you're an SJW because, from my experience, from what I have seen, social justice warriors are about doxing people. They are about um, they're about getting things done no matter what, and they to explain. I mean, I could go on and on about them, but to
Yeah. No,
explain what
please.
okay, well, what a social justice warrior is you have this generation, right? Millennials, and they grew up, in the PC era, in like, post hippie kind of era. These, group of people, and the when the PC era began, education, like, it kind of changed a bit, and basically what the teachers and the educational institution, what they were trying to do with their students was, instead of being harsh on them, they wanted to just give them participation trophies and to tell them that the feel good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is special. Everyone is special. Everyone is elegant. Yeah, you can do no wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And these people, they grew up hearing this, just day in and day out. And these social justice warriors, you're not one to, in my opinion, I don't think you are, but and I'm sure you're not. They're basically narcissists,
Mm.
and once you have a narcissist that comes into contact with the social justice, which would be, you know, white people are oppressing you, men are oppressing you, straight people are oppressing you. Now you have a narcissist who thinks that the entire world's against them. So now they can do no wrong, but on top of it, it's now everyone's oppressing me, you know.
Mm.
And so they co-opt movements, and yeah, they just fuck shit up. I have met many social justice warriors. You can immediately spot them once they're doxing people on the internet.
What's doxing?
Doxing is when they get your information. Like
Oh.
they get where you live, they have your phone number, they have your name, and they put out that information. Say, here's that person that's talking right here.
Mm.
Feel free to give them a call, or feel free to stalk them, or feel free to call their business, or their where they work at, and try to get them fired. You know.
I see.
hmm So that's why I don't think that you're one of them. I can't imagine you calling my work and being like, "Hey, so Charles is a racist." Just
Mm.
random, out of the blue, and then my work's like, "Oh my God, we need to fire you because you're a racist," or something like that.
Yeah,
It's happened to a lot of people.
I see. I see.
hmm
Yeah, I think, when I think of, let me just think about what I think of when I think of social justice warrior, because I guess for me, I'm on the left. So when I hear the term social justice warrior, that's a term that I see that people in the center or the right, and again, this is just my view on it. It's not like I have
hmm
the definition, but this is what it
hmm
makes me think of. People on the right are looking at this millennial movement of the left, and it is different, or at least
hmm
it's different than the history books have recorded that the civil rights movement and other movements in like the 60s and
hmm
70s have gone, and so it, you know to me, I think it's a term that describes this millennial left, as you're saying, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a derogatory term, but I think it's a term that's used usually in the context of, like, trying to delegitimize these people, and so
hmm
I think I hear what you're saying actually about uh, the issue of people growing up into narcissists. I hear what you're saying about the issue of certain people have grown up as narcissists, um, which I think we might disagree on the number of people or where exactly they're coming from, and we should probably talk about
hmm
that next. Um, but to me, the reason that I would take issue with that term is because it is a term that I feel like has been used to delegitimize leftist movements that are started by this new generation of young people. And I think for me, one of the things that is, I have to say, I think it could be outside of the scope of this debate, or it's just something internal about myself, is that I really value, like, when I look at movements in the past, it's been young people who have started them. And
hmm
so no matter how much issue I might take with them, I feel like we need these young people, to continue doing this movement, because otherwise, like, just historically, people outside of that age group, haven't really, I mean, there's still people who are active now, but they don't comprise like the bulk of the leftist movements.
Mm. Yeah, that kind of brings me to a quote. Um, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but it's if you're not a socialist at 20, you have no heart. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're not a conservative at 40, you don't have a brain. So, and especially, like, I mean, I'm kind of going a little off topic, but
Yeah.
conservative, that's you can be a conservative, but depending on what century or what age you're in, you could right now, where we're at. 30 years from now, this would be conservative. You know what I mean. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying. But anyways, yeah. I can understand the delegitimizing of the movements is just it's tough to take the movement seriously when
Yeah.
the when like the what's it called? When the goal of it is like equality of outcomes, is oh gosh, just a bunch of different kind of stuff. Like, I mean, do you know about the progressive stack that was in that Occupy Wall Street?
Sorry, say that one more time, just because it was a little cutting out.
Oh, the progressive stack
Mm-mm.
introduced by Wall Street. So basically, you remember Occupy Wall Street,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
That's all about just bankers and all that. We're trying to make bankers and politicians be responsible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I saw happen with social justice warriors was they came into this movement, and instead of being about that, they changed it into shit like, really bizarre shit like, what was it? Native American rain dance rights, no rape zones, really bizarre shit. Like Native American rain dance rights. What? Like that has nothing to do with it.
Uh-huh.
No rape zones. What? The rape is already illegal. What are you talking about?
Uh-huh.
So, and then they introduced the progressive stack, which and you don't know what that is,
Mm-mm.
correct?
No, what is
Okay.
that?
What it means is that the more oppressed you are, the more you get bumped up the list to speak.
Uh-huh.
So for you, for instance, Asian straight guy,
Mm-hmm.
you go in the back, but we want to hear from the transsexual midget in a wheelchair. We want to hear from that person first.
Uh-huh.
Regardless of their opinions, we want to hear them first.
Yes.
So that really drives away people, especially an egalitarian movement like the Occupy Wall Street. That's just horrible, and if you saw how it crumbled too with God, I can't remember her name, but she went by some really like a food name. I don't remember her name, but
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Colbert did a interview of her, and it was just horrible. She didn't know what she was talking about, and just Occupy Wall Street just tanked.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's where I see millennials or social justice warriors coming into a movement like Occupy Wall Street and then just destroying it.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you brought up that point and that specific example, because this is an example where we see completely opposite. And I'll
Okay.
explain to you how my viewpoint is on that. First
Mhm.
of all, like, I think our histories of Occupy Wall Street are pretty much the same. I agree. It was about the 99% and the 1%. It led to a lot of protests. Those protests, I didn't follow it that closely, but they somehow fizzled out. And it was Occupy Wall Street, by the mainstream at least. Like, I think it mainly is now known in history for a movement that somehow fizzled out and didn't really have much focus to begin with. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's at least our baseline, like, kind of histories are the same.
Mhm.
Um, so I think for the way that I see these people, these millennial left or these social justice warriors entering into it, for example, you're talking about Native American rain dance rights, and you're
Mhm.
talking about no rape zones.
Mhm.
For me, what I'm seeing there is someone is taking a narrow issue and
Mhm.
they're broadening it into a more, they're broadening it into an issue that's not simply about economics. And so
Mhm.
here's why I believe in that, because I think, like, if you just have a movement based off of economic equality, which, there's pros and cons. Okay, I'll have to admit. I think if you have a really clear movement, it
Mhm.
makes a lot of, you know, you have like clear goals. It makes a lot of sense. It's more likely to be successful. But I think
Mhm.
if your movement is way too narrow, for example, it only covers economic justice, and it doesn't cover things like racial justice or issues of feminism, which is something we'll talk about later.
Mhm.
Then I think, like, what you end up with is a society that, I think for me, okay, I'll talk for me, like, what we would end up with is a society that still doesn't make sense and is still not equal. So that's kind of how I see that. In terms of the progressive stacking issue, I had never heard of that, and I can
Mhm.
totally see how it comes off, because it's an issue where, it's not necessarily based off of merit or qualifications. It's kind of based off of identities, um,
Mhm.
and I think, just for starters, and I think I want to hear what you have to say about everything I just said. But just for starters, I think the way that I would see that is okay. I'll give you an example. Like, and I hope that this will make sense. Like, when the feminist movement was going on, it ended up being a lot of white women advocating for wage equality, and a lot of the people in the feminist movement, the most recent one at least, like especially black women who were interested in the feminist movement, they felt very sidelined because even though they were really crucial to the movement, a lot of what the movement got centered on was simply an issue of gender, and because it wasn't about race at all, it so ended up that the white women who were kind of fronting this new feminist quote unquote movement, which was really a white feminist movement, they kind of forgot a lot about the racial issues that were also important to the black women who were spearheading who were at one point very important and central to the feminist movement. And so this kind of, that relates to the first point, which is about the dangers of keeping a movement too narrow. And then with respect to the progressive stacking, it also relates to that, because I think what I believe, and we may disagree on this, is that people who have different identities are more aware in general of certain topics because oftentimes they've lived through it in their life. And so, for example, it's generally speaking harder for a black woman to forget about issues of racism, but than it is for a white woman to forget about issues of racism. And so that's where I would see that, the idea of progressive stacking came from. But I really want to hear what you have to say in response to that.
Well, the feminist one I can understand with how, black women want to be more included in that. But the problem is, though, is that it was women still. With the feminist movement, you still had women, racially, different women, but it was still, I can understand that part. The problem with the Occupy Wall Street thing, though, is that it's a completely different subject. Native American rain dance rights there's no relatable thing with economics. There's nothing. I don't know how you could relate that. I mean, I don't know. I don't see economics being relatable to even no rape zones. That's like rape culture or whatever. That's more to do with sexual assaults and all that. That has nothing to do with holding bankers responsible and politicians responsible. So, and also on top of it, you have a big movement that everyone can pretty much agree on. I mean, I don't think I know anybody in the world besides, the elite, the 0.01% that would be against making bankers and politicians responsible.
Yeah.
But once you start including all of these different topics that are controversial, then you're going to break up the movement and it's going to fizzle out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think feminism didn't fizzle. Well, it has kind of fizzled out from the numbers, but it didn't fizzle out as greatly as Occupy Wall Street because it still focused on women no matter what. I mean, it was focused on the racial equality part, but it was still including of women. It wasn't just feminism talking about feminism, and then all of a sudden now we're talking about, I don't know, like an oil pipe, or something, just something way out there. So that's where I think the Occupy Wall Street is different than the feminism movement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I want to just point out is that even though you say you're a centrist rightist, you were essentially on board with the Occupy Wall Street movement, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I just wanted to point that out because it just means that even though we have politically different views, I think there's still probably a lot of things that we have in common, and a lot of movements or causes that we have in common.
Oh yeah. It's just my biggest problem with the social justice left movement has just been the equality of outcomes, just the almost dehumanization of minorities and making them just a platform, making them a shield to push your agendas. And that's the problem that I have. I'm all for, racial justice and whatnot. I'm sure that black people or Asians, they go through a different kind of racism than whites. We still go through our own kind of racism, but they might go through something a little more or whatever. I'm down with that. But once it starts becoming like, for instance, what's happening to Marvel, where we have comics that they're making, and then now all of a sudden now they're making characters in comics that are just they're making the character based on a quota. They're like, maybe fuck the story. Let's just make it an Asian transsexual woman that's gonna fight justice. And she's gonna make all these weird social justice remarks. It's like, that wasn't what Marvel was about. You're making it about the person, like the what they are as their identity, instead of making it about their story. And that's the kind of problem that I have with the left, the far left. I would consider the radical left, social justice.
Yeah. I just for clarity's sake, I think I do consider myself a part of the radical left, and so it should make our conversation that much more interesting.
Okay.
I remember I remember seeing a thing about the comics, and I you know what, I think I agree part way with what you're saying. I think, like, there's an idea that no one wants to be a token, like you don't want to just be and I wouldn't want like, for example, like, just because I'm Asian, I don't want Marvel to make an Asian character just so they can make more money off Asians.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would be pretty bad. I think that I mean, this is a pretty simple point, but I think the other way to I could be cynical about Marvel, and I am. Marvel probably wants to make more money off of Asians, but I think for me to see people celebrating the fact that there are characters that could potentially be more relatable to them, is something good, and I think you could make the argument where, why does it have to be that race or cisgender, transgender are like the cornerstones of how someone identifies with a character? Like, if they grew up in your neighborhood, if they had some of the same struggles, then you should identify with that character. And I think I would agree with that. If I had a comic character who was white and was a woman and had grown up in the same way, I would be like, wow, that's a dope comic, and I feel very understood. But I think the fact that if I saw an Asian male character in a comic strip, or Asian female character in a comic strip, that's probably, I feel like, generally speaking, more often than that, the probability is that they would include some things from their life that that
relate to why that identity is. But when it's not, though, when it's just made to be a quota, when you find out what happens when you find out that we made this character because we're all for progression, and that's why we made it, not because I had a really great idea and I want to put that idea forth. Now it's just more like, well, I just want to fill out the quota box so that the left is appeased. You know what I mean? That's where I don't like it. But I can agree with what you're saying. Of course, yeah. They can make whatever kind of character they want. It's up to the artist. But when they start interjecting their political, fronts into it just to appease a crowd, that's kind of, I don't know. That doesn't sound right to me. Personally.
Yeah. I think like the general way that I see all of this is like an issue of, maybe you've heard this before, so you'll have you'll already know what you think about this, but the issue is one of representation and whose voices get heard. I think if Marvel just created a token Asian character, then that's BS. But I think, I guess, like, the place that I'm coming from, and you may say that it's too simplistic, but I think the place that I'm coming from is, like, I look at all of our for example, presidents. Okay, I look at all our Congress members, our representatives, the people who are CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list goes on and on, and I
Hmm.
see like who's in power, and so
Hmm.
just the fact that I see people who look more like me, and when I see people who look more like me, I think, well, if they look like me, maybe they were treated kind of like me too, and so maybe they care about the issues that I care about, and I think
Hmm.
that kind of view is the way that I'm looking at things, as big as elections to something as small um, as the characters that they put
In
in comic
comics, yeah.
books. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I can understand that, to feel that, but I mean, and we're going way deep, but
Yeah. It's good.
it's when it becomes about affirmative action. You know what I mean? Where it's more like we're gonna hire you not because of your your degrees and your knowledge, but because you're filling the quota box, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where like I don't know, like I have that problem with even with politics where they hire somebody and it's just even white people or whatever. There's all favorites up there and all that. We
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
agree on that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from on that. Is just I don't like forced.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be forced. I want the most, like with politics wise, I want the most intelligent, the most fair people up there, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, whatever. But when it becomes about that, when it becomes about the identity politics, that's when I have a problem. That's when it's like, okay, no, like you guys need to stop. you
Yeah.
know and
I.
every race is bad on that. Everybody does that favorite shit. Whites as well. you
Mm-hmm.
know
Yeah. Yeah. I think I hear what you're saying. I think what you're saying is like, don't include someone just because of their identity. You should include someone because of their merit.
yep.
Um, and I think I generally agree with that. I think the part where we probably still disagree is the extent to which their identity is important in the kind of merit, the kind of perspectives and views that they have. Now, I'm not saying that, like I'm going to vote for, any Asian person, no matter what
Just
they
because they're
believe in,
Asian,
just
yeah, yeah,
because
just
I'm not about that. I think I was at one point, but my friends were telling me that I was being dumb. Um, but yeah, so anyway, I think maybe that's kind of the place where we disagree. I mean, I think we definitely both agree that we want the best people in the positions that they deserve, and like need a system that's good at that.
hmm
Yeah. Um, okay. So that's not a bad place to leave off. What do you think? Do you want to move on?
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I just want to touch up last thing with social justice warriors that
Okay.
if you ever get the chance to really look into, especially Tumblr, is where you're gonna find the radicals, and I mean they have some really really bad stuff in there. Like I mean I don't know if you ever heard of Otherkin
Mm-mm.
or Headmates.
Mm-mm. No,
Oh
you've
man.
done your research, my friend.
Well, yeah. It's I mean I'll just give you a quick rundown. Headmates is just basically people with schizophrenia,
Mm.
but these people are telling the people with schizophrenia that the voices in your head are actually like legitimate people, legitimate like souls inside of you.
Okay.
Being fed to you, and they when you look at these people that are telling this stuff, the headmates
Mm-hmm.
or other kin, you're going to see a lot of I'm a feminist, I'm a social justice warrior, I'm politically correct, I'm da 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 da, on and on. You don't see no right leaning guy who's talking about headmates. I
Mm.
haven't seen a single one. It's very very left. And then
Mm-hmm.
other kin, um man, if do you know what a furry is?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a furry is somebody that they're in a costume, right? They're in
Mm-hmm.
a costume as an animal, imagine otherkin as the opposite. Basically, a person that thinks they're an animal, that
Okay.
thinks that that thinks that they have the spirit of a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. There's dragonkin, there's fictionkin, all these different people with these crazy radical ideas, and they just it's yeah. But it's on the left that I see it. It's
Huh.
definitely left leaning, definitely left leaning. But yeah,
Wow.
check them out.
Okay.
Check them out. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun looking at these kind of people because yeah, I'm not trying to make fun of them or anything, but it's bizarre.
Okay.
It is just wow.
Okay.
But yeah, I just yeah, I still don't think you're a social justice warrior. For you to even dare to talk to me, on a platform that just tells me no, no, you're willing to listen. You're not willing to start doxing me and all of that. So
Mm.
that's just my opinion. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
but
I do not have enough. I've never heard of those things, and maybe I'll respond next time. But I don't know what to say about that right now. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Um, so what would you, do you want to jump straight into feminism, or do you want to talk a little bit about political correctness?
um, we can talk a little bit about political correctness. I mean, I don't have too much of a problem with it. It's just I don't know. I feel like it shuts down speech.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion. It just I don't know. It all came from, I mean, the social justice warriors, millennials, and political correctness. That stuff came from the Frankfurt School in Germany, post World War One.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I don't know. It just for me, political correctness just feels like a good intentioned kind of concept, but I don't know. Some people feel I feel like you see people take it too far
I see.
sometimes.
I see.
And definitely up high too. The journalists. That's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest problem I've been having is with journalists, with just people in positions of power where they take this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah. I think political correctness is probably one. It's actually more of a thing that I probably wanted to talk about a little bit more than
okay,
you wanted to talk about it. But we don't have to spend too much time. But I think the issue that I have with political correctness is that's like a term that I have an issue with, because political correctness has never been used as a good term. It's usually used as a way to say like you shouldn't be policing my speech. You shouldn't be telling me what to say, and
hmm
I think that's generally harmful, and it's a way for people to kind of shut down. But
hmm
here's what I'll say about it. I think there are some people who, for example, like I think there's people who, when they hear a term that they don't like, if let's say it's a racial slur, or or not even a racial slur, just something that has like gone out of fashion. For example, like the word Oriental. Like you don't
hmm
hear people calling Asians Orientals anymore. So
hmm
and people get really really angry at that, and they kind of shut someone else down. And I think that's a point where I agree with the people who use the word political correctness. If you're going to shut someone down for using a word, then that's not cool, because I think that's a place for education.
hmm
Um, and I think it's the same for the other side. I think when if there's someone who is using a term that's now outdated, or for example, like in the trans community, like tranny is now a word that's usually not being used by people outside. Like people in that community usually use words like transgender or like gender nonconforming and stuff like that. And the way that
hmm
I see that is like, it's this group of people who have been, called a lot of names in the past, by people just normally out on the streets, but even people with education and power, like doctors and stuff like that, and they were sick of it, and so like coming up with a new name for themselves and a new label for themselves is a way for them to kind of they're words in the end, honestly speaking, but at the same time it's kind of a uh, it's a way for them to say, hey, like everybody else, you don't define who I am. Like we get to define who we are, and it's kind of a mental health boost. You know, it's a self
Mm.
confidence boost. And so, you know, when people are like, you know, why are you, you know, policing my language and stuff like that? I think if people are, I think, you know, when people say that, it's an opportunity. You know, you could be like, oh, so why do you, like, where did the word uh, Asian come from? Like, why is Oriental not used anymore? Or like, why is the
Mhm.
word transgender used? Like, why is tranny not used anymore? Um,
Mhm.
those are like, you know, opportunities for people to learn. But you know, overall, from both sides, I think you know, some people are like kind of too harsh and they block out any hope of anyone gaining like an education, and some people are too defensive, you know, like they feel like they don't, people who are using the wrong word, they feel like they don't have the time, or they feel like, you know, they should be able to say whatever they want, and that's when I take issue with that.
Well, and I can agree with you on that with the certain words, you know, and them being offensive and trying to kind of moderate that a little bit. But I felt that political correctness, it was further than that.
Hmm.
I thought that political correctness was, um, how to put it, um, it was just, it was more about, gosh, I can't even. I'd have to do. I'd have to find out what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, that's
but I,
okay.
but I thought it was more than that. I thought that political correctness was, um, gosh. Well, you know, we can come back to it, but
Sure.
I agree with you on shutting down, you know, certain offensive words like tranny or oriental. I can completely understand that, but I thought that it encompassed a lot more than just, you know, a word like that.
I see.
But I'd have to find specific examples, and I'd have to go through, and you know, we'd agree or disagree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But okay, yeah, I can pretty much agree with you on that, though.
Cool. Yeah, and we can come back to it if you think about, or if you remember what
Hmm.
you were going to articulate. Okay,
So you
so
feminism?
yeah, feminism. I'll. I think I think feminism is great. But so I'll let you say first.
Okay, well, um, hmm. Well, let me give a little bit of background first.
For sure.
Feminism for me, I learned about feminism about, oh gosh, I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Um, well, not really learned it, but well, I guess I delved into it. When I was a kid, I had a feminist teacher as a fifth grader.
Hmm.
My mom, quote unquote, said she was the worst teacher I ever had. She was
Okay.
just mean, very very mean. Um, and she doesn't identify as a feminist. I'm very glad my girlfriend doesn't identify as a feminist.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, so a lot of women have had problems with feminism, especially since, you know, as we talked about with social justice warriors and how they co-opt movements. You know, feminism, atheism went through it. Occupy Wall Street went through it. So let's go over the talking points of feminism.
Yeah.
So the first one, the big one, I think that everyone, and you mentioned it earlier, was the wage gap.
Mm-hmm.
So what? Let me ask you, what is your understanding of the wage gap?
So I have two thoughts on the wage gap. The first thing is that the wage gap is basically the sense that, like, or not the sense, the documented reality that for the same job with the same merits, a woman will be making a certain percentage less than a man.
Hmm.
And it stems from many different factors, some of them being the fact that oftentimes, or almost all of the time, women are well. It stems from a lot of different factors. I guess I don't want to single us, you know, like a single one out. Maybe we'll talk about
Hmm.
them later. The second thing that I have to say about the wage gap is the fact that as a feminist, I think that the wage gap shouldn't be the major issue that is dominating feminist movement right now, because in my opinion, the fact that because I think I have the fundamental belief that, I'm anti-capitalist, and so I think that, the fact that someone is saying like a female CEO should be paid just as many billions as a male CEO, and meanwhile a female janitor should be paid just as much minimum wage as a male janitor is 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 only a small part of the issue. Another part of the issue that we can't ignore is the fact that CEOs and janitors, the wage gap between them in general is way too high. So
Hmm.
those are my two thoughts on that.
Okay, well, so the wage gap, the numbers changed a lot from my understanding. What is it? 23%? Is that correct? 23 cents
23%
to the dollar?
less.
Yeah, yeah. So it's 77 cents to the dollar. Is that
That's in
right?
the ballpark of what I remember. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, so or well, I could link you to a couple of the studies.
Hmm.
I have about four of them,
Hmm.
and one of them's a feminist study. It's the AAUW.
Okay.
Um, so in the forward, I'll read off the AAUW, and you'll see where I'm going.
Hmm.
So the forward says it, and here I'll link it in the chat,
Okay.
so you can just take a look. Let me see here. Let me put this on full screen. How do I how do I do this? Oh, here we go.
I okay. Hmm.
So the forward says women are paid significantly less than men in nearly every occupation because
Hmm.
pay equity affects women and their families in all walks of life. It is not surprising that many women consider the issue important. Yada yada yada. Just the usual. Um,
Hmm.
so in this study, this is the feminist study, by the way. We've got Christiane Corbert, senior researcher at AUW,
Hmm.
writes about gender equity. And we got Catherine Hill, director of research and the co-author of many AAUW reports, including Crossing the Line, Sexual Harassment School, Why So Few Women in Science, etc., etc., etc.
Hmm.
So in this, it looks pretty cut and clear. They they say straight out, 77 cents to the dollar, and they go
Hmm.
through it. What what really sucks about this study, though, for them at least, was that when they made this study, they had an agenda, and
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
agenda was to prove the 77 cents. The problem that happened, though, is that once they went through the data, it didn't come out the way they wanted it to.
Hmm.
So on the second page, I'll read this little part right here.
Sure.
What accounts for the unexplained gap? Consider a hypothetical pair of graduates, one man and one woman from the same university who majored in the same field. 1 year later, both were working full time, the same number of hours each week in the same occupation and sector.
Hmm.
Our analysis showed that despite these similarities, the woman would earn 7% less than the man would earn.
Hmm.
So we already went from 23% to 7%.
Hmm. Hmm.
So why did this happen? Well, I'm not going to go into through the entire study here, but they
Hmm.
show a bunch of graphs, and as the graphs go on, you start noticing that the wage gap starts going down. It's because the 23 cents to the dollar or 77 cents to the dollar is a median. It is
Hmm.
it is not accounting for any of the factors. And like you said, now it could be due to discrimination, but it's
Hmm.
illegal to do so. Um, it could be due to life choices. It could be due to becoming a mother.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, there's a study. I actually didn't copy it, but there is a study. I could find it later on. Where women are actually out earning men at a younger age.
So let me
So,
clarify let me just clarify real quick what you're saying about the study, which is they found a gap, but what you're saying is that they didn't control for the factors. So what you're
yep,
saying is like they found a gap, but they're not saying that for the same job, they can't prove that for the same job women are earning less than men, is what you're saying
yep,
about the study. Okay. All right. Got it.
yeah,
Keep going.
yeah. So and like I said, like when women are younger, they found that women actually out earned men. I don't remember how much percentage it was. It was minimal. It was like 5 or 6, 7%.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's where I have issue, is that even like if you, I'm not going to deny that there's discrimination, that there could be discrimination, but it is so minimal. It is so tough to find discrimination when, if let's just say that you work at Vaughn's grocery
Mm-hmm.
market, and you negotiated for $15 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
but the woman, she, because maybe she's, more, women are less aggressive, as just genetics wise and biology, women are less aggressive
Uh-huh.
on certain things and all of that. Maybe the woman didn't really negotiate, and she ended up with $13 an hour.
Uh-huh.
Now there's a wage gap. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So and the only way to purely eliminate the wage gap would to be set wages that you can never negotiate for higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've understood it, and especially like, on top of it, women getting babies, that's going to factor in.
Mm-hmm.
If a man is working, he's got to pay for his family, so he's doing 50 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
and the woman's doing 0 hours. She's got to take care of the child. Well, there's a wage gap. She's on leave now.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a wage gap. So that's why, from my understanding of the statistics I've looked at about 5 or 6 of them. They all come to that conclusion, especially government statistics, that women just have different life choices, and if there is discrimination, it's impossible to tell. It's impossible to narrow it down and say, well, women are discriminated right here. You'd have to go through every single job, and it's just, yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, that's my issue with the wage gap talking point, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's just it's blown up to be this 23 cents off from a man, and already in this study I just linked to you, that's a feminist study,
Mm-hmm.
they're already going down to 7%.
Yeah.
Already, second page in the report, it's already down.
Yeah.
So
Um, cool. Yeah, I think um, I hadn't looked at these studies, and I'm not as well researched as you, so I have to give you props for looking at everything. Um, and I think what I'm hearing you say is like two things. I think the first thing that I'm hearing you say is like you don't, or like it's frustrating when people are dogmatic about their ideas. Like
mhm,
people think that there's discrimination, and then even if they find that there's no discrimination, they're going to make it out to be something big anyway.
mhm,
And that part, I think I agree with you in the sense that I don't want people lying just because they think something is true. I want people to really like tell the whole truth, and
mhm,
deal with reality as it is. So I think I understand where you're coming from in that. Um, I
mhm,
think in terms of the second part that you're saying, which is about, I think what you're saying is like women are different negotiators. They have different life choices. Oftentimes they decide to be mothers, and that accounts for some of the wages. For example, like if you're going to be a mother, there's going to be wages lost from that. Or if you're
mhm,
not as good of a negotiator in terms of salary, then of course you're not going to negotiate as high of a salary.
mhm,
Um, and I think that's where we have probably a fundamental disagreement, which would maybe take many, many episodes to talk out. And I think um, I think what my viewpoint is on that is the fact that I do not think that in general, genetically, women will be worse negotiators than men. Um, I also don't think that women have to bear, and this is a different way than you put it. So
mhm,
I don't think that women should have to bear the economic burden of taking time off for childbirth on their own.
mhm,
So let's just talk about the negotiation thing for first. I think um,
mhm,
like for me, I think if women do happen to be, negotiate lower salaries, which to be honest, I don't know. Maybe I've heard it before, but I don't have any concrete facts on that. But if that were the case, I think I wouldn't be surprised, because what I'm seeing there is I think we have a society that has male and female roles, and so we teach our men to be too aggressive, and we don't teach our women to be aggressive enough. And
Mm.
then the kind of the rules of the game, or the norms of society in terms of negotiating, the fact that you have to be an aggressive negotiator. For example, like I could imagine if you're negotiating and you're too aggressive, then I'm going to just like completely shut you down and be like, no. And then,
Yeah.
for example, if someone's really shy, or, not trying to advocate for themselves too much, I could be, as a manager, I could be like, oh, like, you're not pushing too hard. Like I see some potential in you, and, you're not trying to be a cocky asshole or something like that. And I could give you a
Mm.
higher salary. So I think what I see in that negotiation, the reason that I wouldn't be surprised is, like, I think that we operate in a society where we teach our men and women unequal things. So growing up, they're acculturated into different ways of being. And then the second thing is that a lot of the rules of the game in our society are tilted so that a lot of the things that we teach men eventually end up paying off. And then
Mm.
the issue about childbirth, I guess I already said it. I mean, I just think that I think that as a society, childbirth for women is a deeply personal thing, but at the same time, it's socially valuable and important for everyone that women are continuing to have kids. And so I think that as a society, we should alleviate some of the burden, or it would be unfair to put all of that burden on the woman whose decision may have been to have a child, but whose the benefits of her having that child affects us all in a positive way.
Hmm. Well, I can definitely agree with women definitely need help when they have a child, that maybe society should be able to to help them out and all of that, and I can agree on that part. But the part that I do have a problem with is it's not genetic. I'm sorry, I used the wrong word, but biologically speaking, men and women, in my opinion and many biologists' opinion, we are very different. Brain wise and all of that. There's actually, I would like to play a little clip
Nice.
of a it's called the Gender Equality Paradox documentary.
Okay.
It was hosted in Norway, 2011,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy is going through, and he notices something in Norway. It's supposed to be in 2011. Norway was like the top gender equality, country in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he noticed that there was a wage gap. So he went around looking around for what was the problem. Like, why are women and men different in this way? Why are women in more science and more this and more that?
Mm-hmm.
So he talked to social sciences, social scientists, my bad,
Yeah.
and he talked to biologists. Now, if you like, I'd like to play this clip of this biologist speaking,
Sure.
and she definitely goes through and makes it kind of understandable as to why maybe women choose these different choices, and maybe it's not necessarily a society thing; it's more of a biological thing, and it just
Okay.
kind of goes into that.
Okay.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
Turn it louder.
Okay.
And any traits that
Yes.
increase the number of descendants you leave behind you will tend to stay in the gene pool. And so that's what's selecting in particular traits, both in males and in females.
Så hvorfor har evolusjonen
Sorry, it's in Norway, so he's I'll tell you what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah. You can just summarize.
So why has evolution made females and males different? Is what he's asking.
If women are generally the ones that give birth, that lactate, that raise children, it would be very surprising if there wasn't some kind of psychological orchestration that helped women achieve those tasks and made those kinds of tasks particularly pleasurable to women. So things like empathy in women, things like avoiding dangerous confrontations where you may be hurt or injured, things like avoiding social exclusion, being pushed out of the group, all of those are good things. All of those mean that you are more likely to survive and to reproduce and to leave children who themselves also reproduce.
Og ifølge Campbell det sånn
So according to Campbell, that's why women
også derfor dagens kvinner mer orientert mot andre mennesker.
are more orientated to other people. Sorry.
Many psychology studies, one of the biggest sex differences is that if you put people under stress, for example, if you say to them, in about half an hour we're going to be giving you some quite painful electric shocks. We're getting all the equipment ready, so you'll have to wait. Would you like to wait by yourself or would you like to wait with someone else? Women will choose to be with other people. Men typically under stress choose to be alone. Don't do it with others.
Menn og kvinner
So yeah. So I mean she goes on a little bit further, but yeah, you got the basic idea. And I won't play the clip, but basically he plays her a clip of a social scientist saying that basically there's no difference between men and women. It's very minuscule. And she just basically shuts it down and says, I can't believe that you would say that when, women have all these hormones going on inside their brain, and to say that would have no psychological effect at all on women is just preposterous. So that's where I'm coming from with the negotiating and stuff like that, as she sort of touched up upon that maybe it's more of a biological thing instead of a discriminatory kind of thing, or a societal thing. And just the last point, I'm sorry, I've been rambling.
No.
The last point that I do have is that I would, if you want to look into the wage gap even further, a good place to look at it and to see where it starts narrowing instead of 77 cents to the dollar would be to look in countries where everybody's impoverished. Men and women tend to go for the same jobs when there's less equality, because you're just trying to get paid. Whereas in America, where you're free to go anywhere, you're free to do whatever you want. If you want to be a nurse, you can be a nurse. If you want to be a babysitter, you can be a babysitter. You'll tend to have more of a gap between the earnings of men and women compared to a place like like Syria, where you're just trying to get a job. You're just trying to survive, So that's where I come from on the wage gap part.
So what you're saying in that last part that you're talking about is, are you saying that women may be selecting lower paying jobs in general than men are?
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from, and I'm impressed with the kind of scientific backing that you have. I think that let me see. I mean, I think part of our fundamental disagreement is about how much is encoded in biology, kind of a nurture and nature kind of a situation. So I'm not sure if that will be resolved, and I don't have any concrete examples off the top of my mind, I have to say. And yeah, I think maybe that's kind of part of what it's coming down to, how much is structured by nature and how much is structured by things like gender roles, and other things that we're teaching people in our society from a young age. Yeah, so maybe we have to. I think maybe for now, I think we would have to agree to disagree there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to keep going, or did you want to stop it here?
I think we might want to end. We're hitting the 58-minute mark, so yeah. So it's been really good, but I think we should probably end for now, if that's cool.
Okay.
With you.
Yeah. That's fine. We can touch back on feminism. I got a couple more topics to talk about on that, but yeah, for sure. Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks so much for being on this. We talked about a couple of different things. We talked about social justice warriors, and I think I'm hearing what your point is, which is that you're saying that a lot of movements, especially the Occupy Wall Street movement, which at one time had a clear message, was essentially co-opted by a group of people who, in your view, broadened the movement. Not actually, I don't think in your view they broadened the movement. I think in your view they attached the movement. They try to tack on some other things onto the movement that probably shouldn't have shouldn't have been there in the first place. I think for
Yeah.
me, probably the way that I see it is that is they're broadening the movement. So we had a disagreement there, and then I think this issue of feminism. One part that I wanted to point out that I agreed is that I think like people should not be skewing facts just based on what like they think should be happening, and I see that sometimes on the right too, and maybe we can
Oh
talk
yeah.
about that
Oh
another
yeah.
time. And then the other issue is about what really comprises the difference between men and women. Is it something kind of biological that's related to how bodies are and how hormones work, or is it related to like how society teaches people to be when they grow up? And I'm probably more on the society side, and you're probably more on the biology side. But overall, it was a really really good discussion, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
What are your
I think
thoughts?
so too. I think so too. It was awesome to be able to discuss this with you and to um, still be cool with each other, not not to devolve into some just crazy talk or attacking each other. It
Yeah.
was more about discussion. It was more about understanding each other, even though we disagree on
Yeah.
things or we agree on things.
Yeah.
It's still we can still look each other in the eye as equals. I like that.
Yeah. Um, okay, cool. I think we can be done with this segment for now. There's obviously so much more to talk about, and yeah, I agree. I think these things are so important. I don't think I really held back that much, but so I'm glad that we were able to like have a nice, good discussion about it. We really got into depth about a couple of things, and I understand where you're coming from a little bit more now.
Thank you, and I see it more from your side as well. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Until next time.
All right,
Bye.
peace.